Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Nom Watch Review, part of Nom Talk Network. It is so good to see you all after a long break that I had from Monday, doing a wonderful and amazing review for us. On this show, if you don't already know, we review the latest film drop or throwback celebrating a milestone while eating and drinking our favorite movie and snacks. But tonight, I am known as your host, Jordyn Orozco, as always. And right now, I'm enjoying a wonderful locally, it's a doghouse, and it's like you can't really see it, but it's like little mini like corn dogs, which I was like, I don't want a full corn dog, even though like two equals one. I don't know. I was never good at math. So yeah, I have two, and then I have some little French fries here, and then I have my traditional little Nom Talk Mai Tai, which I feel like Cutwater should be sponsoring Nom Watch, Nom Talk Network, right? Because I've literally been drinking Cutwater cocktails ever
There you
since I
go.
started here
Yep.
on Nom Watch. And so anyway, I'm doing the wonderful little Tiki Mai Tai, and it's amazing and beautiful and wonderful and delicioso. So I would like to introduce some of my guests here, not some, but all people that I have worked and just met with, and I'm so excited to say hi to all of you. Let's say hi to Waiya, Mikey, and Elysia. It is so good to see you, Elysia. Thank you for joining us. Let's start with you. You are literally in halfway around the world, in Amsterdam, and joining us for this wonderful and amazing review. So it is good to see you. What are you eating? What are you nomming on? I know it's like 4 a.m. where you're at, so you might not be doing anything in like water, but what are you doing?
It's 5 a.m. I do have for the drink water, but I got a little breakfast here. Some yogurt with the muesli and yeah, vanilla.
Oh, so healthy shit. Got it. And we love that, and we love it. We love it. There's like a joke, like I always have the most unhealthiest, but like best tasting shit on the show. Except for the last review I did. God, I can't remember who it was, but he was like, I have this like pre-dinner thing, then I have my entree, and then I have this lovely cheesecake topped with like this. And I was like, what the fuck? You beat me. All I had was a microwavable cheeseburger. And like it was amazing. So thank you for joining us. I'm so excited to hear what you have to say. And Mikey, what's going on? It's good to see you again. What are you nomming
Hey,
on? What are you chomping on?
pretty good. I just got a tart cherry drink right here. I had some chicken nuggets earlier. That microwave cheeseburger sounds really good right now. I'm starving, but
It was the
but
one from Costco. Yeah.
yeah, that's exactly the one I used to get. But
Yes.
yeah. Um yeah, I'm not really eating anything right now, but I'm doing good though. Happy to be back. Happy to see you guys.
Yes, awesome. So awesome to see you here. Yeah, and you got to get to Costco to get that. I think it's like a Wagyu cheeseburger, like microwavable thing. It's like a
Yeah.
six pack, and my dad always gets like two, and I'm like, Dad, why do you get two? I don't need two because I'm gonna eat one box by myself. It's
Yeah.
amazing. And Wyatt, so good to see you again. What are you nomming on? What are you chomping on? Cooler,
It's a
cactus cooler.
throwback.
It is. It is. It's like whenever I'm craving that, like thank God my work sells that in vending machines because I work at a college, and kids are like, we need soda. So like they have like cactus cooler in like one of the machines, and I always go over there and I'm like, this is so good. So yes, I freaking love it. But if you don't know why we're here, if you don't know what we're talking about, if you don't know what film we're talking about, we are talking about the newly released Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which holy shit was a freaking film, right? Like it was a film, it was everything, it was all this packed in one like the 2.5 hour like film. And so we're going to talk about that tonight. Just to give a little bit of a hint to everybody, we're going to have a little trigger warning about suicide. Nom Watch, Nom Talk Network and Nom Watch Review are this month. We are supporting the and fundraising for the Trevor Project this month. Wow, I can't talk. Sorry. We are fundraising for the Trevor Project this month at Nom Talk Network. And if you all don't know what the Trevor Project is, it is an organization, it's a nonprofit that basically helps to basically youth can call this number, and they basically, if they're thinking about suicide, whether and if they're LGBTQ identified, trans identified, queer identified, they can call this number. If they're thinking about committing suicide, all that stuff, they have counselors, they have people that are, that get paid but also volunteer work, that talk to them, that tell them, no, like, you're worth everything and you're worth the world, please don't do it. And they have saved tens of thousands of lives throughout their entire career that they've existed. And so that's who we're fundraising for. Please definitely donate to them. I try to donate to them every year. They're a wonderful and amazing organization, and they were around when I was a kid, and I wish I had called, at certain points in my life as a queer identified person to do that. So I definitely think we should applaud them. And also, please, if you can donate, there's a link in our bio on Twitch, and as well as any of our streaming platforms and social medias that we have. So that's it. Moving on. Let's talk about the freaking show, man. So my lead up to this, and I've already told my wonderful guests, is I didn't really watch the first one until Saturday. And when it originally came out, which I think was like 2022, I think. Or no, sorry, my bad. It was like
2018, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, it was like 2018. I had people that saw it, and like one of my best friends, he was like, "You got to see it. You would love it. It's amazing." I was like, "Yeah, I'll get around to it." Never did. And then it was like pandemic hit, and then I like people just you forgot about it. And then after that, I heard the new one. This one was coming out, and I was like, "Okay, cool. Let's watch it." And it was on Amazon Prime. It's like for something to rent. So I had the house to myself. I like made myself steak dinner. I got some wine, and I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna watch this movie." I didn't even finish half of my dinner because I was literally sitting there watching the thing, like literally glued to the TV, because it was so good and it was amazing. And the fact that it was just like, it was everything that I was, fuck. And then watching this movie, it was like the friend that told me to watch it, and he was like, it was really good. I was like, okay, you have to come to the movie theater with me because you were the one that like referenced it to me. So you have to come. And he was like, okay. So I bought our tickets. We went. It was at a theater where they do dinner and then you can do drinks and all that stuff. So we went, we got a drink, and then we went in, and my mind was blown, right? I was kind of pissed because I didn't know that it was like a to be continued movie. And that's only happened to me once in my life. And that irritates me because I'm like, fuck, I wish I would have known like this was a to be, because I thought it was going to be concluded, like all that stuff. But knowing how Spider-Man movies are, I should have known. But this movie was utterly amazing, and it was beautiful. So that was my introduction to it a little bit. I've never been like a huge Spider-Man fan. I've always been like Tobey Maguire, and then Andrew Garfield came out, and then Tom Holland, and then this came out, and I've always been a huge fan of animated films, and I was so excited to sort of like get immersed in this world. So Waiya, let's start with you. What was your introduction to this film? What was your thoughts going in, and so forth?
Well, kind of like you, I was a little late on the game on Into the Spider-Verse, just because there's just so much in the MCU that takes up so much of your time that it just kind of fell through the cracks. I heard good things about it, but I was like, oh, I'll get around to it. I did see it last year, and so I was pretty hyped about this one, and it did not disappoint. I'm really, really stoked, and I really like the energized fan base behind Miles Morales and Gwen. It reminds me of when characters were introduced when I was in my prime of reading comics and I felt a part of something. Because like I remember when Spider-Man 2099 came out and I felt like my character because it was created for us, kind of a thing. So it's really interesting to be on this side of the tunnel and just enjoying everything in the fandom.
Yeah, and I think you hit a good point. Like for me, especially people will call it but like for me, I was like, this was actually a film where people that I'm surrounded by every day, especially in my work and like what I do with like education with students, like people need to be seen. And this sort of like these two films were a way for people, and especially like even me, right, where I'm like, I have a really good friend who is half black, half Latino, right? But had a sort of like she got brought up in black culture. And this film, I was like, I asked her, I was like, did you see this? She's like, oh yeah, I did. And I took my kids. And I was like, yeah, you did. Because like, her last name is Lopez and like, but she identifies with both, but at the same time, she's like, this film sort of reinforces the fact that like this culture exists and like my kids can be seen, I can be seen, right? Like for a moment in life, right? And like even me, like identifying as like a queer person of color and just seeing this, it was utterly amazing and it was beautiful and I loved it. And Elysia, what about you? What was your introduction into this film and before? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I was really into Marvel growing up, but not specifically Spider-Man. And then of course, yeah, there was the Tobey movies, and those were just iconic. And then like we had the Garfield movies, and I'm like, why are we doing this again? And, and then by the time Tom Holland comes around, it's like, oh, okay, fine, and at least they gave him a different introduction. But then when I saw Into the Spider-Verse, that was what really made me for the first time in my life like deeply interested in spider lore, because yeah, it's as you say, like for me it was particularly Spider Gwen, just seeing that on screen, like, oh whoa, that's like a character like me. And yeah, after that I started to get more interested in like I hadn't realized that there were all these different spider characters actually being written about in the comic, so that got me way more interested in them. So I was very prepped and very excited for this one when it came out.
Yeah, I love the fact that Spider Gwen was like a ballet dancer and like you
Right.
can see it in this film
And also a little bit punk too. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
She wears ballet
what I
shoes.
Yeah.
hell yeah. I was like, fuck yeah. And like there was a point where she was like she did like a pose and she was like on point and I was like,
Right.
I like slay girl, you ate.
Yeah.
And like and for me, like that's also something to, right? Because like as a like I was a dancer for 10 years, like I professionally danced and like all that stuff. But to see this like as a female who was like a strong female heroine lead, especially in this film, right? Because I feel like um the first film was very like male heavy and then this film was very focused on Gwen and like her experiences and like what's going on in like her universe but also like her trying to connect with Miles again and do all that. So I just feel like it was very important for that to be portrayed, especially for like little girls who like are like now embracing the fact that like they want to be this like strong female like lead role. They want
Yeah.
to be these like things, and it was beautiful. I thought it was just like a
But it's
beautiful character.
but it's also it's like a kind of more real strong female. It's not just like,
Yeah,
it's not the male fantasy of strong female like a lot of female superhero characters have been in the past, not to
yeah.
name drop any Black Widow names, but
Yeah, no, absolutely. I absolutely 100% agree with you. Mikey, what was your introduction to this film? What are your thoughts on, going into this?
Right. So I saw it when it came out, back in 2018, I guess. And I really liked it. I didn't go in expecting to like it because I was never really into Miles Morales because it was part of a different universe of Marvel comics. The Ultimate Universe, I guess, is what it's called. And then that was the ended up like combining the universes. Well, I think he's the only character that survived, but I mean, they combined them. And so like I didn't really consider him an actual Spider-Man. But I went to see the movie anyways, and I just loved it. I was blown away. I thought it was great. I love the character now. I think he's amazing. I really like Gwen. I think this is the best version of Gwen. Like not like
Yeah.
absolutely.
the girlfriend version. I didn't like that one so much, but this one is like the best version of Gwen, and also probably the best Spider Woman, I think, of any of iterations of it. So going into it, I was like really hyped to see this new, see where the story was continuing. And like I was all in. I was ready to go. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's a very real sort of comment where like, especially in this one, we get that like you're not supposed to exist sort of thing happening, right? Like you weren't supposed to be this. And I feel you on that, right? Where it was like, damn, like he kind of like, I don't want to say existed on accident, but like he wasn't necessarily supposed to be Spider-Man, right? And like we get people like Miguel who's like, yeah, you're not supposed to be here, like I know, and blah 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 blah. And I feel like um Miles definitely, owns that in a way, but he also is just like moves past it and is like, no, I'm Miles Morales, I'm Spider-Man, like get over it. Like get over your fucking shit. Get over how like, high up on your totem pole you think you are. So yeah, so before we get into the nitty gritty, I would like to know everybody's popcorn buckets. So on Nom Watch Review, we rate everything from 0 to 5 popcorn buckets. Let's start with you, Elysia. What did you give this?
Yeah, so yeah, I was struggling with this because like I gave it a 9.5 out of 10. The first movie I would definitely give 5 popcorn buckets. This one I feel like for me was just not quite the same level of cohesiveness. So I guess I have to give it 4.5.
Okay.
But still, and
And
best movie I've seen so far this year for sure.
absolutely. And Mikey, what is your popcorn rating?
So I give it a 4. It could have easily been 4.5, but I'm gonna leave it at a 4. It was a very, very good movie. Very
Yeah.
little things to pick on it. I mean, just like small things, but I mean, yeah, it was awesome.
Absolutely. And Waiya, what would you give this rating?
I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. It was a 4, but as I got more thinking about it today, I bumped it up to a 4.5 because I think time will tell that this is definitely going to be like the Empire Strikes Back of the Spider-Verse trilogy. So
Right.
I'll put that out there.
Yeah. I also gave it a 4.5 out of 5. I rarely give films, depending on what they are, I really give films 5. But this one, there were certain things in this film that I was just like, I don't know if I agree with that. And like, I'm opposite of you, Alicia. Like, if I were to rate Into the Spider-Verse, I would probably give it a 4. I feel like
Really? Okay.
I feel like this one stepped it up a notch because I think the intersectionality between Miles's parents was more. And I mean, this is definitely a personal thing. I feel like um, it was more visible in this film
Right.
than it was in the last one.
For
And
sure.
that
Yeah.
to me, I'm like, if somebody is named Miles Morales, like you're like, but you present as black, like you're still brown, right? Like you still have that, and there was still a lot of that in the first one. But in this one, I was like, you saw the culture, you saw this multi-ethnic and multi-diverse like part where like right like they're on the roof celebrating his dad's birthday, right? And you see black people, you see brown people, right? And that to me is like the ultimate, like especially for kids of color nowadays, like that's what we should be portraying, right? Like we shouldn't be portraying like just black culture, right? Or like just brown culture, right? And then the fact that like he even said like in this film where it was like he knew how to speak Spanish, but he didn't like really want to because he like
Right.
knew,
He's
it was
getting
like
a B.
that.
He's
Yeah.
getting to be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Like, and it was like, but I loved it because that's the reality of some people, right? Like for me, growing up as a brown kid and not knowing like Spanish, like that was a real thing where it was like now, even nowadays, like if I go out into the real world and people see me and see my color, they talk to me in Spanish and I'm like, oh, no hablo español. And they're like, what? But you just did. And I was like, yeah, that's all I know. You know what I mean? And like, it's like a thing. And so I think this film for me, like it just gave it a little bit up of a notch because I mean, not only did it like portray Gwen in a way where like I agree with you and like we'll talk about sort of like this the cinematic the animation that came in, but it hit me in a way where there were certain parts where like I was in the theater and I teared up and I was just like fuck, like
Yeah.
that's real and that's like that happens at like family gatherings for me, right? Like that happens at certain things for me. And so I think for me that's just, personally what, sort of made it a little bit up
Well,
more than
I see that. I think I actually do think and then, which is why like I wish I could give it 4 3/4 popcorns because I I see that there's a more depth of storytelling in the new one, I think. And for me, my only hesitation is that like it doesn't have that snappy polish that in terms of the dialogue, in terms of some of the animation choices made, not the art. The art is incredible, but just some of the little details aren't quite as polished and pulled together as the first one. So that's my only, but I
Yeah.
do think that the story goes deeper. And yeah, the way it ends is just, I'm going to be thinking about that and the implications of all that for a while.
Yeah. So let's talk about the story. Let's talk about the pacing. I think what you said, so for me, the first one, the pacing was like super quick. Like if you didn't know anything about Spider-Man lore and if you went into this movie, you'd be like, what the fuck is going on? Right.
Yeah.
At least for me, like I got, I was watching it and I was like, oh, I caught up. And I like not caught up, but I was like, I kept up. I knew what was going on. But also I'm like a person that needs subtitles because like I don't mind subtitles at all. Like, which is why like I love watching foreign films. I'm like, fuck yeah, subtitles are great. And I'm like, okay, cool. And I was like doing that and watching it, and I was like, okay, cool. I caught up. I knew what was going on. This film felt like it was a little bit slower. And I feel like it
Definitely.
was a little bit more digestible for the audience that was watching it. And the way that the story was paced, it was paced perfectly. I think like the first one, where it was like, okay, cool. Like if you didn't get the first time, you could watch it a second time, you'd be fine. But this one, I was like, oh, you could get everything in just one go and you're fine, right? Like, and the story of there still was that villain arc with the Spot, right? Like there still was that like, oh shit, this is what we're doing. But then there's like a deeper level of like character building, but also like character like struggle. Like, and it wasn't necessarily about the Spot at the end, right? It wasn't necessarily about like that sort of um thing that was going to ruin the universe. It was about multiple things, and I appreciated that because it wasn't just one focus. It was like multiple focuses where you're like, oh, I agree, like what's going on, and you could kind of develop your own theory behind like how you felt about it. What did we think about the story pacing? Wyatt, let's start with you. What did you think about how across the Spider-Verse went?
Well, first off, given the movie a 2 hour plus runtime, I felt really gave it time to breathe. And it, like you said, the first one, the pacing was very frantic and fast paced. Well, this one is just, here's an action piece to get you geared up, but then breathe and fill in this moment. This is what this character's going through. Then let's go hop over to Gwen, let them breathe and see what they're going through emotionally. Personally, I thought the writing in this one was fantastic. One of the key quotes I remember was when Gwen was in her band. She's like, I didn't join this band to talk about my feelings. I joined it to hit them with a stick. And I was like, that's such a good line. Yeah, honestly, I love the pacing. I love the storylines. The interesting thing I found about it was like you touched on, the Spot really wasn't the antagonist, and in fact the movie doesn't really have a main antagonist. He is an antagonist to move the plot along, but then once you get into the plot of just him finding his place within the Spider-Verse, that becomes the story. And there not being an antagonist almost kind of feels hashed in at the near end with Miguel filling that role, but it's almost like they needed something there to push it along, which felt a little uneven, but I'm leaving room for the next one to finish filling it out. Like it's that Empire Strikes Back moment. It was like, oh, I need more here, but I have to wait until the next one for that more to be there.
Right. Yeah, and I definitely want to talk about the cast like after this because the freaking voiceover cast of both of these films, especially this one, was absolutely spot on
Insane.
and insanity, right? Like you're
Spot
sitting there,
on. Yep.
and my thing is like with voiceover actors, if I can tell you're the voiceover actor, you're not doing a good job.
Yeah.
And that's my thing. But with all of these actors, and I looked them up after, I was like, what the fuck? Right? It was like amazing.
Yeah.
Let's go to you, Mikey. What did you think about the story? What did you think about the pacing of this entire film?
I thought the story was very strong. I thought the pacing was fine too. It was slow in a little in some parts, but that's kind of what it is. What a Spider-Man movie is. He's very introspective. He always thinks about what he's doing, the actions that happen and stuff. So he's that character. It fits that character basically. Um, the overall story I thought was good. I felt like um that right, there was no real main antagonist, and I think that's part of why it suffers a little in my opinion. That I felt like he needed that, and at the end I felt it was a little too predictable towards the end, and I felt
Hmm.
like the reveal of why, you know, Miguel O'Hara is doing what he's doing, the reveal of what happens to Miles where he ends up, it was a bit, I was kind of like, I saw it come, and I I was hoping like it would be more like the entire movie is so clever, and it's so well animated, and there's so many good things about it, but I felt like that's kind of like a holdover from like bad, not bad, but like typical Marvel writing. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Where it's like I wanted them to advance it, like be so advanced that like they came with something that just blew my mind. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
it was definitely overall a great movie visually. The story was amazing. It's even though it was a little predictable, I'm there for it. I want to see what happens next. I'm ready for it. Um, and I knew it was going into it was going to be a two-parter, so it's kind of like I wasn't too surprised with that. But um, the cliffhanger they left it on, I was like, that's interesting that they lifted on that one. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I can see that. I can see that. That's kind of like an Empire Strikes Back kind of cliffhanger. So, um, it was interesting. I only bring up some points like that because it's for me liking the first one as much as I did, not expecting to like it as much as I did. This one was like, well, my expectations are so high now. It's like, it's like hard to meet that. So I guess
Okay.
it's my fault for like having super high expectations on it, but
Can I ask
No,
you
but
guys
I
a question? Oh,
yeah.
yeah. No, go ahead.
about the antagonist. So, I mean, of course, you talk about Spot as an antagonist, and I like that he started ridiculous and became like this, world-ending threat by the end. But indeed, he wasn't there most of the time. So I thought of Miguel as the main antagonist.
Well,
That,
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I think I agree with that too, but go ahead. Yeah.
Um, I think this is where the writers are being extra clever and how they're tying in extra properties, because Miguel really also doesn't feel like the antagonist here, even though he explains his motivations for doing things. I think that's going to be a rug pull because him being in that universe, they're trying to say that it's triggered off the canceling the canon event, but it actually feels like they're trying to segue in convergences of him being in a wrong universe, and it broke down that universe and being a vehicle to bring Miles and Gwen into the MCU via the multiverse and convergence that's happening there as well. Because Miguel still had his
Hold on. I have to process what you just said because that was a lot. Do that again. Wait, do that again.
Okay, so it's explained that Miguel's motivation is that his child died and he moved to a universe where Miguel died and he could be with his child again. And he said, oh, because I circumvented my canon moment, it destroyed the universe. But what really happened is he was in a different universe he shouldn't have been in, which they've established in the MCU causes a convergence and destroys that reality. Okay. So like his canon moment wasn't changed. His child was still dead. He was just in the wrong universe. And so I feel like they're going to be using this as a way to pull Miles and Gwen, because right now those two characters are white hot in popularity, and pull them into the MCU because they've tied it in with the convergences of being in different realities. And then in that way, Miguel can be redeemed in the next one because he's not a villain. I mean, he could just have bad motivations, and then he learns, oh, he didn't. It wasn't changing his canon moment that caused this. It was him being in the wrong universe, and then he stops chasing him. And he goes like, oh, okay, I was wrong. You know.
I mean, but that's what I like about Miguel as an antagonist is, you know, you don't have to be a villain to be an antagonist, but he was constantly the character that was getting another character. You know, of course, we care about Miles and Gwen, and he was constantly preventing them from doing the things we wanted them to do as an audience.
Yeah, I see him more of as like a Batman character that will keep you from doing the thing you want to do because he knows it's wrong, but he's not exactly telling you why, and he's got his reasons.
And is he right? Because, you know, do we need I have several issues with the canon event thing because first of all, didn't Miles already lose somebody? Like,
Yep.
didn't we have his
Yeah, he
canon
lost his
event?
uncle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They play really loose with how they're building the world on the canon events and how they cannot be changed. It sounds very similar to what was happening in the Loki series as, oh, these are events that can't be changed. And if they go a different way, we have to fix them. So
Right.
It's almost seeing it from the other side of the coin. So I totally get you on that. Totally get you.
My whole thing about the antagonist is that, like, as you mentioned, Miguel, he lost his child and he wanted to go be in a universe where his child was. That really feels a lot like Multiverse of Madness with the Scarlet Witch. And that was my problem with it, was that, like, I feel like they're recycling villain motivations almost in this movie. Like, this is written way better, absolutely written way better. But if he's the antagonist, then his motivation is pretty much Wanda's motivation, and we've seen that already.
And Kingpin from the first movie was the same. Yeah.
But with that said, it kind of feels like the Marvel studio as an overarching control over the whole multiverse. Be like, hey, this is the plan moving forward, and we need to get all of these properties that can be separate kind of firing in the same way so that we can pull them all together, because that's what Secret Wars in the comics kind of did. They took all of the different separate universes, converged them into one, and reset it all. And that kind of feels like what the MCU is trying to do.
Which is what they might do with Secret Invasion, right?
Right.
There you go.
Whoa, connections. Elysia, what did you think about the story? What did you think about the pacing of this movie?
Yeah, I mean, I found like I was really relaxed for like the first third of the movie. Even when they were doing like action scenes, I was just like chilling into it, but completely captivated by what was going on screen. So, I mean, yeah, it was definitely slower pace than the first. That's fine with me. I thought that they did lean into some of the more emotional story beats, like surrounding family, identity, found family, and I really loved the way that it ended, because then you have, you have, he's got back the person that he's lost, but it's not the same. But he's also confronting like this other possibility of like it's himself, and he literally took away this Spider-Man-ness from himself, from this other version, and this is the consequences for this other version of himself and for his wider world. And so he has to come back and confront that. And so then we've got Spot looming over us for the next movie. We've got whatever's going on with Miguel, and now the question is, are these two going to be friends or foe? And is it going to be more antagonists, or, the way they left the questions for the next film has me really excited.
Yeah, and I think, putting aside the fact that I didn't know this was going to be a continuance film, and that was my bad. I think you're right. The story and everything that happened, like moving forward, we were like, oh, okay, oh. And I do agree with you, Mikey. It was very predictable, but I'm also kind of like a weird, like, psychic when it comes to these kind of films. Cause like my friend that was sitting next to me, like, so spoiler alert, by the way, we're like halfway through the fucking stream, and I should have spoiled it from the beginning, but like, it was the moment when he got home, and like he escaped like the hub of the Spider-Man, and like he goes, oh yeah, he's like, I'm Spider-Man, and he goes, and his mom goes, who? And then like laughs, right? And I immediately like whispered to my friend, I was like, he's in the wrong universe. And he was like, what? And I was like, just watch. And then we find out. And then we see Gwen in the right universe. And she's like, her spider sense goes off. She's like, fuck, like he's not here. Like he's in the wrong universe. And then the second time I like was like kind of psychic was when he was on the punching bag and he was with Uncle Aaron, and like Uncle Aaron puts on the fist, and like I was like, that's I was, and then you see fuck, what was his name? The villain.
Prowler.
Yes, you see Prowler come, and it was the same sort of like body figure, and like, and I was like, that's him. I was like, that's him. And then he was like, what? And then like he goes, oh, and then like he pulled his mask off, and I was like, fuck yeah, it was Miles Morales. And he was like, how did you know that? And I was like, it's common knowledge, bro. Like
You
we're
watch
talking
enough
about-
movies.
I do.
Yeah, exactly.
It's multiple
it's not
like
new.
we're like it's not new. We're traveling multiverses. Like this isn't something that is like I'm pulling it out of my ass, right? And even though that was like kind of predictable, it was still like, what the fuck? Like, what's going on, right? And I feel like at the end of the day, um, the story itself, uh, it worked out in a way where I didn't think it would. I appreciated the fact that like in the first one we get introduced to like Spider Ham, we get introduced to like Spider Noir, we get introduced to the anime Spider Woman, and we have all those characters, right? Which are voiced by wonderful and amazing like John Mulaney, like Nicolas Cage, right? Like we get all these wonderful like VOs for that, right? But in this one, we get introduced to, like Cowboy Spider Man, we get introduced to freaking Jessica Drew, who is Issa Rae. We get introduced to, the Peter Parker that was in the first one, which is Jack Johnson. We get freaking like all these wonderful and amazing characters, right? Like Paviter Paparkar, right? Like in the
My
Indian
favorite.
fucking yes, which was
Mhm.
absolutely amazing, right? And the cast was beautiful, and what I appreciate about animation movies, which I don't think that like a CGI like real life movies can do, is like you can introduce an entire world that looks like ours, but it's very different and it's cultured in a very different sort of like diverse field, right? Like that you can sort of immerse us in a very short time, right? Before we move on and talk about the cast, Cue Ball redeemed You're So Punny and has requested a pun from Elysia. So
Okay. Okay. Why why was Spider-Man, why did Spider-Man do well in his driver's test?
Why?
He was a great parallel parker.
that was so good.
I didn't see that coming. That was awesome.
Solid.
That was good.
I'm gonna name my kid Parallel and marry somebody named Parker just to like
Peter
freaking
Park's
do
car.
that. That's
That
great.
is
I
great.
love that. I hope Cuba, you are satisfied with that. But let's talk about the cast in this freaking film, right? So, like I said, you had you had Shamik Moore, who played who plays Miles Morales. You have Haley Steinfeld, right, who plays Gwen Stacy. You have Brian Tyree Henry, who plays Jack Morales. Luna Loren Velez, who plays Rio Morales, who's Miles Morales' mom. Then you have the original Peter Parker with his kid in this one, which was so
Yeah.
adorable with the little
Mayday.
bird. Yes. Which was voiced by Jake Johnson. Miguel, who was voiced by none other than Daddy Oscar Isaac. You have Spot, who was Jason Schwartzman. Man, come on, right? You have
Good
Jessica
choice.
Drew, which was Issa Rae, right? Like
Good choice. Yeah.
Issa Rae, freaking A, man. And then you have Daniel Kaluuya, who is Hobby Brown. You have all these wonderful and
was my
amazing
favorite.
people. Yes, right.
That was my other favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have Andy Samberg, who is Ben Riley. You
Mhm.
have all these other wonderful Rachel Dratch, Jack Quad, right? Or Jack Quaid, who's Peter Parker voice, right? All this stuff. You have all these wonderful and amazing actors who come into this. And for me, like I didn't recognize one of them except for
For me, it's Rachel Dratch. She
Me
looked so
too.
much like her.
Me
yeah,
too.
yeah, it was
Got that right away.
it wasn't Jason Schwartzman. I think it was Jack Johnson who like was in the first one, and I was like, yeah, and but I also recognized John Mulaney when he was Spider Ham, and but it's also just the fact that like you're like, oh, I know who that is, but then you get immersed into the entire story and you're just like lost the entire time, right? Like in these characters and in what's going on, and things are moving fast paced, and this is what's going on, blah blah blah, right? Like you have a woman of color who's pregnant, right? Who's a fucking Spider Woman, right? And I definitely appreciated the cast. I think everybody was cast perfectly, and the voices were spot on. Let's go to you, Elysia. What did you think about the cast? What did you think about the voices? Was there anybody that stood out to you specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I was obsessed with the cast. I mean, just the cast of characters, but also it's impressive who's playing them. And indeed, they disappeared into it. Like even I knew it was Oscar Isaac as Miguel, but I kind of forgot
I didn't.
repeatedly
That
while
was so
watching.
weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't.
Um, and but yeah, for me it was like the side characters that really made this movie special, and same for the first one, to be honest. But yeah, my favorites were Hobie, Spider-Punk, and Pavito. Yeah,
Yeah. I loved Spider-Punk. He was
yeah.
freaking amazing.
And
He
what they
was
did with his
amazing.
animation was so cool, with
Yeah.
combining like
Yeah.
the different, animating on the like the threes and the fours for the different parts and combining that so that he had this really distinctive style. But then I kept wondering, so if Gwen's hanging out in his universe, doesn't she stand out as like not looking like that? Like, aren't people like, why does this girl move so fast and smoothly?
Why doesn't the girl look
3D.
like punk tabloids right? People are like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I don't know." But that like begs the question, right? Like we see it in this perspective, but like do the people in their universe see it like that way, right?
Good question.
Where
Yeah.
it was like, "Oh, she left her shit there. Oh yeah, she was staying there." And you're like, "Okay, well then she must have stood out." But also like
Right.
do the people in these universes see these Spider-Man, Spider-Woman, Spider these, she's these days and thems, right? Like, do they see them the same way that we do, right? With this animation. And so that's
Yeah.
definitely a question.
And
Um,
like, do they see the Prowler, the Donald Glover Prowler
Yes, that
as
was the
live action?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, good cameo. Yeah.
right, right. And Mikey, what did you think about the casting? What did you think about the voiceover?
It was spot on. It was rarely does an animated movie have like actors that embody the characters they're
Yeah,
portraying. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Daniel Kaluuya as Spider-Punk was amazing. I think that's his normal dialect too. Like that
it is.
England where he's from, he speaks that way. And that was so good. I loved that so much. I also like the smaller casting choices, like Andy Samberg as Ben Riley. And I thought that was hilarious because that's kind of one of my favorite Spider-Man. And like what they did with him, I should be mad, but I'm not because it's very funny. Because it was like the most melodramatic like arc of the Spider-Man series, and the way he played it was like that kind of works. I like the way they played it. Um,
yes.
it was perfect. But yeah, it was like their casting was just right on. It was very good. And the voices make the movie stand out better. You know what I mean? Like when you have a movie that like they just got the celebrity voice because it's a celebrity and they wanted to have maybe
Yeah,
people would come watch the
yeah,
movie. Like you don't that doesn't work. That never works for me at least. I mean, I don't like that. But for here, it like they cast the people for the Spider-Man or women that they fit, I think. And that's why it was Issa Rae, perfect
perfect.
choice for that
Hmm.
character. I mean, like, I don't know. It was just so good. Very, very good. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It was. It's definitely one of those things where like I didn't know that was Issa Rae, and in when I was watching this. And that's what I appreciate about voiceovers, and that's what I appreciate. And the thing for me is like I would rather give somebody that is like just starting out an opportunity, especially in a big film like this, like, or it is a person of color to do the voice acting, right? But in this one, they did do that, but they also got people that were like, yeah, let's just do it. But also don't sound like yourself in a way that like people won't recognize, and it worked. It worked perfectly. So I appreciated it. Wyatt, what do you think about the casting?
I thought the casting was great. Again, Donald Glover being a cameo was perfect. I was like,
That was
they did
so
it.
awesome.
They did it. They had to meet through the glass. It was great. Also, Ben Reilly, as someone else already mentioned, it was just awesome to see Ben Reilly showing up. And I love that they animated him in that late 90s extreme edge era of comic books. And it was just chef kiss. Loved it. Yeah. Also, I don't want to butcher his name, so I'm just going to say Spider-Man India was fantastic. I loved his whole character. The level of charisma of that character was just, yeah. I love to see a Spider-Man that just loves being Spider-Man, because it's like the classic Spider-Man that you just hero worship and fantasize about, being just swinging through the city and just being carefree in those moments, and just, you know, have a head sure that things are going to work out. You know, it's just classic.
His the way he talked kind of reminded me of Deadpool without like all the cursing.
Yeah. Similar.
Yeah.
Very quick, very high wit, and just I want to hang out with you, bro. It's just cool.
Yeah,
I'll take his hair too.
Oh my god, yeah.
Olive oil and jeans.
Yeah, I think that was like, so the friend that I was with, he lived with a roommate, and his roommate was in our wedding with us, and he is he's Indian, and his name is Sadan, and we were like talking, like we weren't talking the whole time, but during that whole scene we were like, damn, I wish Sadan was here, because he would feel so seen, right? Like, and he would feel so like, just shit, like, this is my culture, like, put in a major film company, right? And like, while it was funny, and that character was probably like the one that stuck out to me the most, like, it was one of those things where I was just like, fuck, like, can you imagine like being there, and like, yeah, you have all these films that come out, yeah, you have Bollywood, yeah, you have all this fucking shit that happens, but like in this film with Spider-Man, like, you have somebody that like is culturally relevant to what's going on, and then has a complete canon, right? That like, that Miles, interrupts or like doesn't, right? And like, it's seen. And so it was one of those things where I was just like, fuck, like, this is so good. Much like, Miss Marvel and everything that came out, like, right, with Kamala Khan and, Muslims and everything. I just felt
And
like this was
Echo,
just, yeah, this was just like a movie for people to be seen, and especially the first one too. And I absolutely loved it. But yeah, so are there any sort of like things that stuck out to you in this film that we haven't discussed? Like, any cameos, any things that you guys want to talk about that relate to your popcorn buckets? Let's start with you, Wyatt.
Other than just the sheer amount of Easter eggs they put in, they put the Spider-Mobile, all the different Spider-Mans I was recognizing in the background from like, oh, wait a second, that's the 2000s animated Spider-Man. Hey, that's the 80s animated Spider-Man. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. And I think, as Elysia mentioned earlier, there was a lot more polish put onto the first one, most likely because no one was looking at that studio while they were doing it, and they were able to just do their own thing, and it only had to be it. Whereas this one, it's got to be more than the second one. There's all this pressure because everybody wants it to succeed. And then, of course, Marvel in Disney in general is just like, hey, when is it going to come out? Hurry up and get it out. Hurry up and get it out. And it better be more. It didn't have the amount of small background jokes as the first one did, but I think it still had more. It had less of something, yet still had more. And I loved it. I loved just the background Easter eggs. I'm going to be watching this over and over. I'm going to be like, too much. So great.
Yeah, and I think along the lines of what you said is when Miguel is explaining to Miles about like the Spider-Verse, right? And like it's like put in a web. And I was like, that's cute, but kind of typical, but that's cute. When like you get like the Tobey Maguire, you get the Andrew Garfield, you get all this stuff, and then you get to I don't know what the animated Peter Parker was, but I think it was Toby or was Andrew. And Miles goes, "You lost him?" And he was like, "Yeah." And like he kind of like got like down, and it was sort of like that link between like the Spider-Man that I grew up with, and then linking it to sort of like this Miles Morales like universe that's going on, right? I definitely love that sort of like, what do you call it? Like a Easter egg, right? Like and all the other things that happened. So Cue Ball suggested a poll really quick before we move on. Which Spider-Verse character do you identify with? Peter Parker, Gwen Stacy, or Miles Morales? You can also add your own if none of those. So let's start with Elysia. Who do you identify with the most?
I mean, I guess I already said Gwen Stacy. I
Yes.
feel like I should give another answer, but I think honestly that's got to be it.
Yeah, you don't have to. That's no is an answer, and that's great. And Gwen Stacy's your answer. That's awesome. Mikey, what about you?
Tough to say. I mean, there's so many different characters. I mean, of those three, I guess I obviously don't physically resemble Miguel O'Hara at all, but I think his personality, I think I would have to say a little bit, kind of like devoid of humor.
Yeah. So you're admitting that you're a vampire. Is that what you're admitting?
I can be
We
at
just-
times.
We all need to know here on Nom
I'm just
Talk
a little.
Network.
I'm a little dark sometimes. I don't know. But
That's
of
cool.
those
That's
three,
fine.
I would say that I would probably try to pick one of the other Spider-Men that are there, but I couldn't. There's so many to pick from, so I couldn't.
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
Clearly,
Maybe
we
you know what?
saw-
I'm the car.
Peter Park's car.
The Spider-Mobile. Yeah, that's it.
I'm the
There you
car.
go.
I'm the
Spider-Mobile.
burger. I'm the burger in the cafeteria. That's who I am.
I just do my thing. I
and-
just go around.
I need to know what the car's canon event is.
Me too. Was it like
Some
your
horrible
engine
traffic
died?
accident,
Like,
I'm sure.
yeah. Like, was it like your engine died? Like, I don't. Like, we don't know. And,
I think they just pulled that from the animated series because that was his car. They were selling the toys.
Right.
yeah. And Waiya, which one do you identify with?
I'd have to go with Spider-Man Noir just because I'm kind of kooky like Nicolas Cage, and all these confusing colors are weirding me out. So, yeah.
I love it. I don't know if I have an answer. There's so much that went on. Yeah, I think, I don't know, maybe I'm pretty vanilla, but yeah, like I think I'm pretty honestly, okay, to be honest, like I'm for sure Miles Morales. I don't identify as black, but I feel like there is definitely an intersection of certain identities for me that I was like, shit, like, I'm struggling with revealing this about myself or like what's going on. And, but definitely in your private life, you feel powerful. You feel like you can take on the world, occasionally, especially you have friends that support you and, you can do that. And, you feel like a lot of times you're up against the world and you don't realize that you have support to like back you up. So I feel like that would be my answer is definitely Miles Morales for me. So yeah, any last minute thoughts as we close out this wonderful and amazing review? Let's go to Mikey. Any last minute thoughts about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse?
I think it's just a really well done movie. I think they set up the sequel perfectly. I can't wait for the sequel. I'm looking forward to that. That's like my most anticipated or Spider-Man movie coming up. So I mean, yeah, it was just all around a solid, entertaining movie, and I liked that the characters developed. That's the problem with a lot of Marvel movies nowadays is that the characters they don't learn anything from their adventures. Nothing happens. That's why a lot of them are like getting like people are not like into them as much anymore. But this one, you see genuine character development, great writing. The villains are a little, that's still a problem with Marvel. But I mean, yeah, it was good.
Yeah, absolutely. And Elysia, any last thoughts
Uh,
about this film? Anything?
Yeah, I mean, I liked the setup. I can't wait for this to come out on streaming because I'm going to be like pausing it all the time to, look
Yeah.
at all the little details. I loved all of the comic booky references, when they would like have a little asterisk in the corner of the screen, like explaining what hammer space was or something. That made my whole
Yeah.
theater laugh and like, what the um yeah, and I'm also excited for the way that they included so many references to like the MCU version of the Spider-Verse, and
Mhm,
also the
mhm.
whole thing, like even the graphics they use look the same for the whole multiverse situation and incursions and things like that. So that has me hopeful that maybe Marvel and Sony are playing nice enough that we can get some significant and cohesive crossovers coming up, especially of course Miles and Gwen.
Yeah. Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong. Was Da Vinci Vulture in this one, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we get like in the beginning when Da Vinci Vulture was in this, and you're like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you get like you travel and then you see a different version of Lizard in Gwen's world, which happened to be Peter Parker, right? Or you're
Yeah.
right. And like you get all these things and you're like, fuck, like this is more complex than we thought, right? Like, and you get that sort of feel. And I feel like a lot of these films that are trying to introduce like these multiverses are not doing a good job,
Yeah.
except for things like everything everywhere all at once, and then this
Right.
film, right? Like
Right.
they're doing a fantastic job at introducing the idea behind it. And I feel like this film, like I didn't struggle realizing
Mm.
that like, oh, they're traveling from different multiverses and it's fine where Spider-Man exists but it's a different version, right? Like and it was absolutely digestible, amazing and great to me, right? Like even though I am super privy to all of what's going on with all of these films and everything, I definitely like I said, I wasn't expecting the fact that it was going to be like there's going to be a sequel to this film, and that's my
Right.
bad because I didn't know going into it like what's going on. But
But
at
a lot
the
of
at
people
the
were like that.
end of the day, I feel yeah, like well, I shouldn't have been because I should catch up on my like superhero lore and I don't. And but like I didn't necessarily hate it all the time for that. There's obviously little things that I was just like, like this could have been better, this could have been better. Um but overall, I feel like this film is definitely something that people should see along with the first one. I feel like it's something that um led up to a really good, you know, next film, right? Like that's something that people are going to be like, okay, well,
Right.
hurry up! Like I want to see it. Which is me. Besides the fact that I didn't know and I was pissed off about it, I was like, okay, well, I want to know what's going to happen. And so I feel like this was definitely a really good film for that. Props to the director, props to everybody, the animators, the people that worked on this, and everybody, the writers, right? Like everybody that worked on this film, because there's not a single point in the film where it misses at all, for me at least.
Right.
And it was just beautiful and it was amazing. So that's all the time we have to talk about this film, and I'm so disappointed because it's so good, and I could talk about every scene, about what happened and every character and every voiceover actor that did it. But thank you all so much for being here and joining me on this review. Let's give a shout out to my guests, Waiya, Mikey, and Elysia for being here. Y'all are amazing. Elysia, thank you so much for joining us so early. I would say hell fucking no if it was that early. So props to you. And I'm so excited every one of you could be here. Please tell us where we can find you on the socials, on anything. Waiya, let's start with you. Where can we find you?
You can find me on my YouTube channel here at Waiya Paints, where I show people how to 3D print and paint their own models and prop replicas.
That's awesome. I love that. And Mikey, please tell us where we can find you in your own Spidey universe.
I'm at Grip C47 on all socials.
That's so like that's great. I wish I could have just like one freaking name for like
Yeah.
all of mine. That's like I like was
Keep it
stupid and
simple.
invented. Yeah, no, I was stupid and invented one thing for every single one of mine, so it's dumb. And last but not least, Elysia, where can we find you on the socials?
Yeah, I also have one name for all socials. It's my first name and then CB. And if anyone here listening is watching the TV show Silo, I'm doing a podcast about that called Wool Shift Dust, a Silo TV podcast, deep dives into that. And you can also find me on the Lore Hounds talking about, amongst other things, this movie.
Nice.
I love that. So I have been running across Silo TikToks where like this like little clips of like everything.
Right.
And I'm like, I gotta watch that. So thank you so much for letting me know
It's
about that.
dystopic mystery box sci-fi thriller.
Yes. And I love that. Right. I love that.
Based on one of my favorite series of books.
I love it. Oh my god. Okay. Maybe I need to listen so I can figure it out.
It's a good one.
Yes. Thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Jordyn Orozco, and you can find me on City of Stars 13 on Instagram. I don't know what my TikTok is, and I don't post on there at all. Please don't follow me. And I let's just keep it to Instagram. I post funny stories. Sometimes I post funny posts, and that's rarely. It's probably like once or twice a year. But thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all so much for sticking with us. For Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, all that wonderful, good, and amazing things. Be sure to join our Discord to keep the conversation going, as well as subscribing to our platforms. We are on everything at Nom Talk Network. Tune into our next show, which is going to be, I believe, on the 16th, which is going to be Friday, which is going to be our basic binges. We're going to be talking about American-Born Chinese, episodes 7 and 8. Yes. If you're not watching that, please watch that. It's an amazing show. Until then, I'm your host, Jordyn Orozco, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. Good night, guys and fellas,
Good
and
night.
she's, he's, theys, and thems.